Hello and welcome to a very special How I Paint Things product review. Now, I was contacted recently by the guys at Green Stuff World, and I'll be completely honest, I had no idea they did anything other than green stuff. So sculpting tools and modeling putties and stuff like that. Turns out they actually do a range of things, which a couple of them they sent along to me, and I thought were pretty cool. So when they asked if I'd be interested in doing a review of their product, I figured, why not? I didn't know this stuff existed, so you might find it interesting to come across too. Now, the bread and butter of what they're all about is green stuff, so a lot of sculpting and such, and they do a really wide range of tools for that. They do these soft, rubberized tip sort of sculpting tools and what have you, which are pretty neat, but one of the ones they sent along to me, which I thought was kind of cool, are these roll makers. Now, these are little flat plastic panels, and you'll hear they've got this texture on them where you roll out a sheet of green stuff into a little tube, and then you just press these things along and get some different shapes. Okay, now there are other rollers that they do. So if you're doing custom bases for your miniatures, for example, these or things like these can be pretty handy for doing that. Now, like I said, I'm not much into sculpting, but I thought that was a neat touch. So I did want to mention them for having been sent along and still thinking they're pretty cool. But one thing they did show me, which I am really looking forward to having a play around with, is these colourshift metal paints. Now these, if you imagine when you see those cars on the street, that you look at them and they're purple, no, they're blue, they're green, depending on which angle you look at them from, that's what these colourshift paints are about. And they have a range of different colours. There's two sets, so I'll flip that one around as well. I might have given the game away a little there. But there are a huge range of colours, and some of the effects are really neat. Now, I've got here an Iron Hands Sergeant, who I've been working on to bring him back up to 8th edition, rebasing and what have you, but he's got a power axe, and I thought it might be neat to try a couple of these paints, and we'll see what it looks like on the power axe. Now, these do recommend that you'll get the best reaction from them from an airbrush. I do have an airbrush, but it's not a common tool to have, just sitting off the side of your painting table there. So I'm going to try and apply it with a brush. It does say that you can brush it on, so we'll see what happens. Now what I'm going to use is this Celestial Azure. Yes. And they don't look like much. When you actually look at the bottles, it's just this weird, shiny gunk. It looks like somebody's... I was about to make an Aliens reference. Somebody's killed Bishop and there's bits of gunk everywhere. But hey, some of you might be a little young to get that one, unfortunately. But let's have a look. Let's crack it open and see what happens. Now, it probably won't show up on the camera very well, but this is this neat, kind of pearlescent appearance to the paint, which is woohoo. And I'm also using one of Green Stuff World's synthetic brushes. Oh man, that's blue. Wow! That's darker than I was expecting, but I do quite like that blue. That shade of blue is neat. It says I want to be quite thin with it, so I'll just put that on and then we'll do the other side. Now after about 4 thin coats and a gloss varnish, this is what we've got. And I'm going to briefly turn off the light here so that you might get a slightly better look at that. Now it can look a little patchy, but you see that depending on the angle you're viewing it from, it's this light, real light blue, and then purple. That's so cool. So I thought I was just going to do that, but to be honest, these actually turned out to be really cool. I think you would get a better result overall from an airbrush, but for spot colors and stuff like that, that doesn't work too badly at all. So what I've got here is another unfortunate test subject, and he's going to assist us. I'm going to pick a different color. I don't know which one. Let's see what happens. All right, so I chose Storm Surge Green, and after 6 coats, this is what I've got. Now that's before I've actually put the gloss varnish on, and the trouble here, again, the lighting actually makes it quite difficult to show you the effects, because I didn't really notice the deep blue I was getting on this bloke. Hang on. Until I was carrying him through the house. So you'll see it struggles a little to show off the more subtle effects. But trust me when I say it looks damn cool in person. It's a little more subtle than I had expected. It's not as pronounced as it looks on the box, let's say, because of course I've got to show you, the maximum sort of effect you'll get. I think having played around with it like that, I'd use these. I'm going to quite happily use these as spot colors on things, like that axe, for example. But if I were going to paint a whole army of these dudes, I would definitely want to get an airbrush. You can use them from a brush, like it says, but best results from the airbrush, I think. I don't think it's unfair to say that, they're telling the truth there. But to my mind, the stars of the show are these acrylic wash ink paints. Okay, shades, if you want to call them that, washes, for you old hands. These things were a real treat to get to play around with. Now, if you know me, and by now you guys have probably been on the channel for a little bit, I like shades. I like the easy way of doing things. And this is actually a fantastic set. Comes with all the sort of basic colors that you're going to need. Your Devlin Mud or your Agrax Earth Shade equivalent. In particular, though, this blush red. I really like this one. This turned out to be a really good idea. It is unlike Carroburg Crimson in that instead of having that sort of deeper, almost purple tone to it, it's red. And I've really liked that. So we have here a perfectly innocent Space Marine and a big old brush with some blush red. And let's just see what happens. Let's go on this backpack first. You'll see immediately that this gives you a different sort of texture to the red than Carroburg Crimson does. And it flows very slightly differently to the workshop shades. If I were to compare these, I'd say they're a little bit, not quite a gel, but they don't flow as much, which, depending on what you're using them for, can be super handy. So let's just go around the whole model, see what happens. He's going to be quite pink by the time he dries, I suspect, but for the purposes of just showing off how this stuff pulls, let's see what we get. So I've gone and turned that light off again, and there we have it. There is that, blush red dried. And, like I said, it would go pink straight over white, but the coverage is actually really good. And the way that it is settled, it performs similarly to a workshop shade, so if you're familiar with those, but the colors I think are a little more vibrant. They're going for a bit more generic than, this has to work over an ultramarine, or this has to work over a blood angel. It's just red. It's just blue. So I figured I want to do a quick experiment, and I'm going to grab this Storm Surge Green Marine over here, and they say that you can put these shades over the metallic paints. So let's see what happens. Now I've gone ahead with that Ether Blue, and I'm actually really impressed with how that's come out. Again, a little difficult to see on the camera, which is kind of a disappointment for these products, unfortunately. But in reality, that blue settled in all the recesses, and it's actually deepened that blue shift on the color spectrum when you're looking at it from the right angle, but it hasn't really changed the green on the high points much. I was joking just the other day about painting Alpha Legion, and I think it might be worth having a play around, maybe try a blue first and then give it a green shade, see what happens. But I just wanted to point this all out because altogether, this stuff as a system, it turns out does work pretty well. I've been thoroughly impressed with the color shift paints. The shades, these washes in particular, I am going to get a lot of use out of these. If there's anything I would wholeheartedly suggest out of the whole set here, these washes, man, these are cool. The brush that I've been playing around with too, these synthetic brushes, they sent me a couple, and I quite like them. The bristles on these ones, they splay out a little bit faster than others, but they do it in a really predictable way, so it's still useful for what I'm painting them with. Base coats in particular, these are the business. So there you have it, guys. My thoughts on Green Stuff World and a couple of their paint products. I'd say on the whole, definitely worth it. If you are painting an army with these color shift metals, you want an airbrush. I would not want to do a whole army doing 6 or 7 coats on every single Marine, but that's up to you. So, as ever guys, hopefully something there was interesting to you. Feel free to drop a comment in the old box below, and my Twitter and Facebook are both linked there too. So, thank you very much for your time. You guys enjoy the rest of your day.